Too many to count. He's a tireless advocate for animals. Steve is a certified animal behavior consultant and is the host of 2 nationally syndicated radio shows, Steve Dale's Pet World and The Pet Minute. He's also a special contributor at WGN Radio Chicago and program host of Steve Dale's Pet World. Visit his website at stevedalepetworld.com to sign up for his newsletter. Subtle.
Thank you.
I could say much more about Steve's myriad accomplishments and accolades, which you can read about in tonight's program, but then our banquet would go even longer than the Oscars. So without further ado, please welcome Steve Dale.
It is just incredibly nice to be back here. Like this? Is that better? Yeah. It is still incredibly nice to be back here. It has been too many years since I've been here. And of all the gigs, of all the talks that I give, talking to you is like looking in a mirror and talking to me in a way, because you all do the same sort of thing that I do. And and you have more hair than I do? Is that what you just said, Mary? So you're suggesting I'm losing it on top?
Yeah, well, when you look in the mirror, you don't see me.
Oh, I see. Okay. It's better than losing it in some other places.
Steve Dale, everyone!
Jill Rappaport mentioned that she began as an entertainment reporter, and I began the same exact way. We were chit-chatting that entertainers will sometimes open up easily to you if you ask them about their pets. And the short end of the story is folks at People magazine and USA Today said, you're spending so much of that file writing about pets, why don't you just write about pets? And that is, in fact, what I ended up doing. One time that I spoke to all of you, to this group, Sue Ewing might remember, and I know you would remember. It was right, I don't know why I was the speaker chosen, but it was right after 9/11. And I remember talking about the human-animal bond, and I had written a story for then Dog World. Anyone remember Dog World? Magazine that's now gone away, but I had written a story for Dog World, and these dogs were kind of working there sort of in an unofficial way. And I didn't know what to call these dogs because they weren't service dogs. They were providing comfort. So I may have been, I don't know, the first person to use the term comfort dog. But I was talking about that, and I looked up, and there was Patty Ventry. Patty, raise your hand. A New Yorker with tears in her eyes when I talked about one particular story of one particular dog. I remember that dog was a poodle that helped someone whose family member perished in the attack. And it's one of those moments as a speaker you have. So sometimes as audience members you remember, but as a speaker I remember. And what I remember most is Patty tearing up and the room tearing up when I talked about this incredible thing called the human-animal bond. And what I want to talk to you about today is the difference all of you can make. If you're bloggers, if you write for magazines, whether they read publications or any other type of magazines, doesn't matter what you do, if you communicate with people, you have an opportunity. Anyone here a baseball fan? So, and of course you're all baseball fans, right? And you're all Chicago Cubs fans, right?
Dodgers!
And White Sox fans. So,
Real serious, baby.
someone said Yankees, I don't even know what that word means. So I called up, the Chicago White Sox weren't doing all that well at one point in the old Comiskey Park, and I had an idea. And I called up and talked to the PR person in charge for the Chicago White Sox, And I said, you're beginning all these new promotions. They had one called Disco Night, that's how many years this goes back. And they had other promotions as well. I said, you need one with dogs. And I didn't hear anything on the other end of the phone for a moment. And I said, really? And said, what have you got in mind? I didn't know what I had in mind, really. But I thought, okay, if we could bring dogs to the ballpark and have maybe booths there with veterinarians and products and other things, that would be kind of interesting to do. And it would be fun, and people would come because they're looking for more places to go with their dogs. Well, they had a meeting about it, and another meeting, and another meeting, and another meeting. But it turns out the Chicago White Sox did what now many Major League Baseball clubs do, and they have dog day events at the ballpark. Most minor league teams do it as well. So that is one way, in an unexpected manner, you can have impact. Social media now. How many of you write something in some form and it appears? I hope it does in social media, right?
Everybody.
I would hope everybody, right, is raising your hands. So there's a tragedy actually that occurred in Chicago, or just outside Chicago, in a suburb where 30 dogs perished, 30 dogs died in a fire. And the training methods, allegedly, of this particular person were brought to my attention. And it made me think of a story I had never thought about writing about before. Because now, all of these dogs, there's pressure to save dogs, and that's a good thing, a really good thing, more than ever before. Old dogs, young dogs, if they're in an animal shelter and they're acting aggressively, what are they for the most part?
Simple.
What? Afraid. They're fearful. And most of these dogs can be helped. But there are time pressures to do it. There's ways in which to do it, which I would call old school or antiquated. And I never thought about, I just thought, okay, saving these dogs is really important. But I never thought about the methods that some people use to do it. And then the long-term impact on these dogs. I'm a part of the Fear Free initiative, if you know what that is. I love the fact that's getting applause. So that is the idea that it first began that dogs and cats and all pets going to the veterinary clinic feel a certain amount of fear, anxiety, and stress. Some actually, I believe, feel they are going to die. And it doesn't need to be that way. And because it's caught on so quickly, and it has, in veterinary medicine, where now entire veterinary practices are being certified as fear-free, because that has happened in that world, dog trainers have said, well, maybe we should use some of these techniques. Dog groomers are saying, well, maybe we should use some of these techniques as well. And that is exactly what's happening. And it occurred to me, well, at what price is saving a dog worth saving? Because maybe, knowing what we know about positive reinforcement, there are going to be problems down the road that can impact public health, in a sense, and that dog's going to for sure land back in the shelter, and if that happens, that dog's going to be euthanized anyway. So let's do it right, and let's not settle for the just get it done approach. Well, that story, thank you. Well, that story, which in fact was inspired by a Chicago dog trainer, that's without knowing it, she just wrote me and said, on Facebook, one of those instant message things, and said, well, Steve, why don't you think about this? And I did, I wrote that story. That story's been picked up by rescues and shelters all over the world, I am told. And they are now thinking about something that I hadn't thought about either, and I expressed in that story more about why that's important. What learning really is in dogs. Intimidation is not learning. It's being intimidated. It's not learning anything. So saving dogs at all costs is not an answer. Another way to make a difference is to be proactive. So it happened to be on my radio show in Chicago. We were getting these calls one day. I had the county veterinarian in talking about rabies vaccines and a low-cost rabies clinic she was offering. but we kept getting calls, my dog is sneezing, my dog is sneezing, my dog is sneezing. And we talked off the air, we said, the dog flu must be coming back to Chicago. We had no idea that an entirely new strain of dog flu was happening in I happen to live in Chicago, if you don't know, or can't tell by my mentions of the Chicago White Sox and Cubs. And we had one strain of dog flu, but no one had any idea that this could be another strain. It turned out to be just that. It was so infectious that we don't know how many dogs for sure were infected by the flu, but it was thousands. And you can do the math now, but about 5% of dogs actually die of flu. So if it's thousands of dogs, yeah, statistically 5% is low, but what if that's your dog that perished? So knowing that, I was trying to, and still continue to incidentally, inspire colleagues like you to proactively write about it. I've spoken at many veterinary conferences asking veterinarians to do the same thing. You've got a vaccine, use it. And the answer is, well, I don't see it. Well, dogs travel, of course. Dogs are adopted happily. They travel too. 20% of the dogs who we know have the 20% of the dogs that have the flu. We don't know they have the flu because they are asymptomatic, but they are still infectious and they're spreading the virus. In any which case, I spoke at one veterinary conference, it was last year, and 3 people were from the Atlanta area in that conference, 3 veterinarians, who later wrote me thank you letters because 3 weeks, they had begun vaccinating, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, wouldn't you know it, the flu popped up in a big way. There was an outbreak in Atlanta. Wow. So you can be a part of making a difference by being proactive. Another example, how many are from this city, New York? Woo! How many are from, well, you kind of are. How many are from other major cities? Woo! Do you know what you all have in common in those cities?
Dog flu.
Dog flu, yes?
Ticks.
Another answer for 20?
Ticks.
Ticks, yes. There is, okay, that's not the example I was going to give, but right now there's an epidemic of tick disease in America, and people aren't talking about it. Guess what? Our dogs are sentinels for it, and the CDC actually knows that and talks to people like me, and of course veterinarians who specialize in tick disease about it. But what I was going to say is rats.
Oh.
And rats spread, as do other animals, a bacterial infection that our dogs can get called leptospirosis, which we can get. So knowing all, and there was a case last year in the city where someone actually died of leptospirosis. So knowing all of that, again, the potential, I hope, would be to write about it. My hope for all of you is that you do understand that your words can make a difference. Woo! How many are bloggers? Woo! So all of what you do, you can make a difference. If you have other outlets, that's true too. Because everything is shared now on social media so quickly and so readily. So that is my message to all of you. Whatever you write, whether it be a newsletter or a blog, that you can make a much larger role, you have a much larger role than you think you might have. And whether it be about fighting puppy mills, talking about pet store sales in communities, or maybe shouldn't be pet store sales in communities. You are knowledgeable, some of you are experts, and if you're not knowledgeable and if you're not expert, you're journalists. Therefore, being journalists, you can find them. And you can make a difference. And that is my message to you. And I hope that, I know many of you have. I hope you continue to do that. And I hope you be proactive. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.